here's the rest of the SGV. So we'll be covering the remaining cities, and then we off to the Inland Empire, San Bernardino, and all those areas. You know what I mean? But it's the end of the SGV, final ones. I got one more video, but it's going to be specifically concentrating on Pomona. You know what I mean? I know that's SGV, but as for the surrounding cities, this will be the last of it. And the Rams are getting killed, bro. Damn. So I'll be starting off with.
It's a G life, swerving in a G ride. Who bang, homie, clutching on the 4-5. Don't ever slip, cause you do, boy, that lead flies. Cause at the bottom we stay hunting in that moonlight. You hear the click, you hear the bang when we pass by. This ain't a game for the riders really earn stripe. That's on the gang for forever on that main line. And it's a thin line, so homie better act right. We keep it active, really active up on this side. You hear the whistle as they're throwing up their gang signs. The crime rate in the hood always stays high. Banging for the vital trucha for the one time. We stay posted, drinking till the sunrise. We stay posted, drinking till the sunrise. It's that G life, swerving in a G ride. Who bang, homie, clutching on that 4-5. Don't ever slip, cause you do, boy, that lead flies. Cause at the bottom.
Now here we have Varrio Cyclones. Now Cyclones is a neighborhood that a lot of people do know of, because that's the neighborhood that Mr. Capone's from, the rapper from High Power. He's been putting them, on the map for years. But their neighborhood is right there in Covina. It's a small neighborhood. Um, you know, they always were small in numbers, been around since the 80s, you know. But nonetheless, man, they be right there holding it down. You can find them on Double Grove and Pass and Covina Drive on Dolly. So throughout those outskirts is where you can find the Cyclones neighborhood. Even though they're not as large or don't have a large territory, I mean, they have you see their presence, and you know that they be right there keeping it active and doing their thing. You know what I mean? And not to be confused with the Cyclones in other parts of LA like Huntington Park and other. Even though they're all cool with them and stuff like that, they're different neighborhoods, not the same thing. This is CYS, and CYS not to be confused with Crazies, because they have the same, letters how they write it, CYS 1 3, but the other ones write it, WS or WV, Crazies or Mayberries. These guys just write always, CYS, and then the rest write it C13, but these other ones that are the CYS Cyclones, and yeah, representing right there for the SGV and holding it down, you know what I mean, for their neighborhood. Shout out to the homie Sleepy from Cyclones. Gracias for the info, my boy, and yeah, shout out to all the homies from Cyclones. Now here you have Linda Flats, but Linda Flats have been around since the 70s. Old school neighborhood, large neighborhood. They active, you definitely hear about them doing their thing. The neighborhood's right here on Rim Grove Park. So through those back streets and through these outskirts is where you can find the Valenda Flats. And not to be confused with the Verdugo Flats. Two different neighborhoods. Um, yeah, they with the function, they definitely be doing their thing out here. Hey, here we have Old Town. Now, Old Town is right there on Minker Avenue and Sunkist Avenue. Yes, and it is the same Old Town as the one from San Diego. Here's the Criminals Click. That's why it's called Old Town Criminals. So yes, it is the same one as Old Town San Diego. Just them, some of their homies moving into the area and starting a pretty much a click right there in recruitment. So they started the Criminals Click, and yeah, it's pretty much how it's recruiting. So their foundation goes way back because Old Town San Diego is an old neighborhood. But as right there in West Covina since the early 2000s, the Criminals Click it's pretty decent size, for a click. Obviously, it's a larger neighborhood, in general as a whole. But as the click, they got a few heads right there. You know what I mean? Not that much bigger, territory, obviously, because it's a gang that pretty much migrated there. So, but nonetheless, man, they be right there holding it down and representing for their neighborhood. You know what I mean? Now here you have Laverne. Yes, Laverne does have neighborhoods. I know people think it's a nice area and everything like that, but like I said it before, they grows everywhere. So Laverne's neighborhood is right there on Park Avenue and Second. Um, but their home base, their dojo, is right there on First Street. Now Laverne is a small neighborhood, been around since the 90s. Yeah, not really that deep, but Nonetheless, man, they be right there holding it down for their neighborhood and going at it with the surrounding neighborhoods, like the Crips and San Dimas, who's like their arch rival. But yeah, that's who Laverne is right there. LV, R, obviously the R for Rifa. So LVR, not to be confused with Little Valley. But yeah, that's who they are, and they be right there representing for their hood. Yeah, so that's Laverne right there.
Here you have Atwood Street. Now, Atwood Street's been around since the 80s, roughly a small neighborhood. But nonetheless, man, they've been right here representing pretty strongly, going at it with the surrounding neighborhoods. You know what I'm saying? Atwood Street locals, you can find them right there on Atwood and um, Madere Avenue. They don't really have a big chunk of territory like their competition does, but hey, nonetheless, man, they've still been able to represent strongly and hold it down for their neighborhood right here. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, that's who Outwood Street Locals is. Right here representing in the SGV.
Now here we have Walnut Creek Street, not to be confused with Westside Walnut or Walnut Street. Is a different neighborhood in itself in the city of Walnut, obviously, not to be confused with Walnut Park. You know what I mean? It's right here in the SGV. Their neighborhood is right there because people are like, "What Creek Street?" Well, it's technically it's Creek Parkway, but technically it's a street. It's kind of like some streets that are avenues, but they just brand them streets because technically it's the street. It's a street sign, so you know what I mean. But yeah, um, it's right there on Creek Parkway and Cherrywood Street. Um, Now they've been around since the '90s, awfully small. You know what I mean? Because it's a nice area, and due to gentrification, booting out other family, makes it hard for recruitment. But nonetheless, man, they be right there representing for their neighborhood and holding it down. They definitely no pushovers. So yeah, that's Walnut Creek Street right there. Now here we have another neighborhood that gets confused. This is Happy Home Puente, not to be confused with Puente 13. This Happy Home. Happy Home is on Ninth and Gale Avenue by Walbrook Drive and Folger Street. It's Folgers in a cup. Nah, but Happy Homes, they be representing right there for the neighborhood. They've been around since the 80s. Deep, they run a pretty decent sized chunk in neighborhood, and they're just as deep as Puente. You know what I mean? But obviously, Puente writes, their clicks first, and then it'll be P13. These guys write HH, XP. You know what I mean? The separation from the rest, how they write their neighborhood. Now, yeah, but that's a happy home, and they be right there representing for their neighborhood and holding it down. Now, here we have Little Hill. Now, Little Hill is right there on Dora Guzman and Harley. The reason why it's called Little Hill is because how the view is on their neighborhood. You see the hills on the bottom, those apartment plexes and everything like that. That from the Little Hill, you can see their neighborhood. That's the reason why it's called the Little Hill Gang, or the Hillbillies, how they call them. Yeah, and they use that term themselves. You know what I mean? Hillbillies, because obviously, they're representing Little Hill. But you know what I mean? But Little Hill, yeah, they definitely, be representing and holding it down for their neighborhood. They with it. They never really been that big or old school, but nonetheless, man, they've been right there holding it down for the SGV, and like you definitely hear about them doing their thing. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, shout out to the homie Crow from Little Hill, feed me homeboy right there, and yeah, shout out to all the homies from the hills that be doing their thing. Now here we have the Townsmen neighborhood. Now the Townsmen have been around since the 1970s. So they've been around for a cool minute. Holding it down. On Humbledon Avenue and Glenhorn Street is where their neighborhood's at. So through those outskirts, like by Calcatow Street, and Renavant, Street. That's where So through those outskirts is where you can find the Townsmen, and yeah, they've been right there holding it down for their neighborhood, and they with it. They with the business. Going at it with those neighbors, and you know, on their side, they run a big chunk and they keep it active. You know what I mean? Like townsmen are not playing. You know what I mean? I know some fools like to clown because of the name and stuff like that, but my boy is they with the function. You know what I mean? definitely be holding it down right there for the neighborhood. And you know, shout out to the homies, you know, from Townsmen that be doing their thing. You know what I mean? So shout out to the homie Droopy. You know, that fool witty. You know, and the homie Dopey. You know, Dopey. You know, shit, Fuka Squab. But yeah, shout out to the homies from Townsmen that be doing their thing. Now here we have Westside Walnut, not to be confused with Walnut Creek or Walnut Street or any other Walnut sets. Um, it's in the city of Walnut, the oldest neighborhood in the city of Walnut, and the largest too. Been around since the 1970s. Um, you can find their neighborhood right there on Baja Drive, you know, or how they, you know, they put it, Calle Baja, and Valley Boulevard on Camino. That's where their neighborhood's at. So everything in the middle is what's considered their neighborhood. Pretty deep, you know, and you know they go at it with the surrounding neighborhoods out there on their side. So their worst rival would be Eastside Dukes. Definitely going at it with the Eastside Dukes. You know, they didn't definitely don't like each other's tension there. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's Westside Walnut right there representing and holding it down for the hood. And really quick in here, 18th Street has a click right here in the SGV2 on Finnerman and Covina Boulevard by the Cypress Park where you can find them, you know, hanging out and doing the thing. So it's the SGV portion of 18th Street that they have right here representing in the SGV. All right, here we have Duarte. Now, Duarte, right on the east side. One of the neighborhoods you do hear about in the SGV, you know, roughly because they run a big chunk in territory in the SGV right here in the city of Duarte, the only neighborhood in the city of Duarte. You know, you can find them right there on Borland and Delford. So everything in the middle, you know, from those boulevards is, you know, Eastside Duarte's neighborhood. And you definitely hear about them going at it with the Crips right there because, you know, there's definitely some bad blood between the, you know, the Crips and their neighborhoods. You know, why a lot of Duarte's crimes seem like it's race motivated, or like, you know, the people will say that they're a racist neighborhood or whatever. Not that they're a racist neighborhood, just that they go at it with the Crips right there. So, you know, it makes it seem like they're just targeting African Americans, but they're not. They're targeting Crips. There's a difference. But yeah, nonetheless, yes, who Duarte, you know, he said Duarte is, and holding it down right there for the neighborhood. Here we have Monrovia. Now, Monrovia, Varrio Nuevo. So it's uh, Monrovia, Varrio Nuevo, you know. MVN is how they write their neighborhood. It's right there on Mayflower and Chestnut. Everything in the middle by the high school is their neighborhood. You know what I mean? The only neighborhood in Monrovia, going at it with the surrounding neighborhoods around there, including the black neighborhoods. Um, you know, Monrovia definitely be doing their thing and representing. Been around since the 90s. They're not really large in numbers, but nonetheless, man, they be holding it down right there. Shout out to the homie Psycho from there. You know what I mean? Like, that's a that's a witty homie, you know, from there. Shout out to the homie Boxer from, you know, Monrovia. Firme camaradas. Here we have San Dimas. San Dimas has been around since the 90s. Roughly small neighborhood, new neighborhood. You know, going at it with Laverne and those neighborhoods out in the outskirts, you know, but they don't really have a big territory, you know, so roughly small because they're roughly new. But yeah, San Dimas, you know, be right there representing, holding it down.